Maybe this is just me getting older, but it really feels like the era of consistent great gaming is over. Like, it's dead. It's not around anymore. And the reason why is because you don't have these great game developers churning out great games as consistently as they used to. At least the big players aren't. Like, the God of War, the Insomniacs, your Elden Rings. There are still great games coming out, it's just not from the big players that we knew back in the day. Your Ubisofts are slowly dying out. Rockstar, obviously, they can't miss with a fucking video game. They're putting out great video games every decade. And the big player back in the day, which is to me my favorite game studio of all time, or at least was Naughty Dog. And I don't mean to come on here and be like the guy, like, back in my day, like, gaming, to me, maybe I am just getting older and I don't fuck with the games that are coming out now. I don't really buy Call of Duties anymore just because it's the same goddamn game every year. The last RPG that I fell in love with was, the Spider-Man games and the fucking God of War games. There hasn't really been one that's come out that I've been like, man, I gotta go see that, except the new Doom game looks hella good, so maybe I'll check that one out. But this video is about Naughty Dog in particular. Naughty Dog back in PS3, early PS4, it didn't get better to me. They were the big players in my mind. They were putting out the Uncharted franchise, which is my favorite gaming franchise ever. And on top of that, they went out and put The Last of Us out, which is... The Last of Us, obviously, we know it today, is probably being the greatest video game ever put out. At least from a storytelling aspect, Naughty Dog changed the game, and they were what, to me, painted what made a good game, and everybody had to step up their plate and had to step up what they were doing storytelling-wise if they wanted to have a storytelling game. And Naughty Dog was so... What a fucking stutter there. Did you guys hear that? Holy fucking shit. Naughty Dog was so good at what they did, they made literally every game developer step off until they eventually fell off, and Naughty Dog did the same. Because if you look at it today, Naughty Dog is still around. They're still putting out games. They're still doing great things and great numbers, I guess, in some aspect. Obviously, with The Last of Us Part 2, which we'll talk about that in a second. But The Last of Us show on HBO with and Season 2's coming out. But The Last of Us, as of late and recent, is not the same that they were. I wanted to come on here and talk about the new IP that Naughty Dog is releasing, Intergalactic, a Heretic Prophet, which is like this 1980s retro futuristic bounty hunter space, game. It's a new game from Naughty Dog. My guess is they got tired of putting out The Last of Us shit, and after the backlash that The Last of Us 2 got, rightly so, they wanted to switch gears and go into a different direction, at least for now, because inevitably The Last of Us Part 3 will be coming out. But the Heretic Prophet, whenever it was announced, got an insane amount of backlash, like an unbelievable amount of backlash. It was hated on, like miserably hated on. And Naughty Dog really kind of needs the Heretic Prophet or Intergalactic to succeed, because regardless of the spectacle that was The Last of Us Part 2, the sales were a dip. Now, a lot of people didn't like the trailer for, Intergalactic, a Heretic Prophet because of the design of the main character and the lead of it. I'm not going to go into that department, and I think that most of the hate comes from because that could be a sign of what to come could potentially be. I'm going to give the game a chance, because I still have love for Naughty Dog. I'm going to give the game a chance, and it still has that style, which I think is kind of sick, like that retro 80s futuristic look to it. I think looks really cool. But what I want to talk about is an interview that Neil Druckmann did talking about the game, and on top of it talking about that trailer for Intergalactic a little bit. Neil Druckmann did an interview recently where he sat down with Alex Garland and they talked about the hate that The Last of Us Part 2 received, as well as talking about the new Intergalactic game coming up and how they're going to delve into religion in a belief that, because it's going to spark controversy, and they talked about the controversy that The Last of Us Part 2 got, and then Alex Garland chimed in and said, who gives a shit about the controversy, and Neil Druckmann laughed, and they kind of just had a joke at the audience's expense. What the fuck are you guys doing? Out of curiosity, like, could you be dumber? This is the part of the video where I kind of get a little more stern. Neil Druckmann is a brilliant creative. However, even the most brilliant creatives sometimes should not be left unchecked. In the Intergalactic, a Heretic Prophet trailer, they flashed all the games that Naughty Dog has worked on. From a studio that brought you Crash Bandicoot, from a studio that brought you the Uncharted series, from a studio that brought you The Last of Us. Except the problem is that the main players who all worked on those games and the entire staff, with the exception of Neil Druckmann, no longer work at Naughty Dog. And Neil Druckmann, yes, did work on those games, however, he wasn't unchecked during that time, and he's unchecked now. It's the reason why The Last of Us Part 2 failed and was a story nightmare, is because he worked on it and was unchecked. The Last of Us Part 1 originally was a revenge story plot. Neil Druckmann wanted The Last of Us Part 1 to have that same story. He was checked. It didn't happen. He had to go back to the drawing board. He worked with a great team. He threw out great ideas, and they created the magic that is The Last of Us Part 1. It's a lot of the same reason why the Uncharted series is great. He comes in with an idea, they say, no, let's do this, they change, adapt. You get the product that's good. Instead, The Last of Us Part 2 is a rough draft that was submitted to nobody because he had the final say, and that's why the game sucked. My guess is The Last of Us Part 2, Season 2, as a show, will be better than the game, because this is probably going to be a more finished product. Hopefully. Who knows if that's going to be true or not. But the point is that Neil Druckmann sat there and has never handled criticism well. The Last of Us Part 2's criticism was just, and Neil Druckmann's correction to that is to say everybody who hated the game hated it because they're sexist, or they're homophobic, or they're racist, or they're transphobic, and that is just fucking bullshit. I'm sorry, that's just bullshit. And yes, there are scumbags out there who hate the game because Ellie's gay. But you know what the difference is? Is that Ellie was gay fucking 15 years ago when the original people worked on the original game. That doesn't change anything. I'm sorry, it just doesn't, and that is a shitty excuse. The majority of the people hated The Last of Us Part 2 because, yes, I didn't think, the fucking, all those ideologies were, a lot of people say, it was super forced. To me, not really. The Last of Us Part 2 is a tragedy because the storyline is a tragedy, and a lot of the people are shitting on Intergalactic because of the lead character's design, because he wants to put that in there to showcase those ideologies, which is, cool. I don't know if ideologies is the right word, but one thing's for certain, in a retro 1980s sci-fi story, I don't know if, that demographic is going to hit the same way. If you're from a narrative, standpoint and a marketing standpoint, the main demographic for that type of story is not going to relate to that character, as much as something else or another design or another, tactic. And I think a lot of people are looking, and then Neil Druckmann goes into that interview after shitting on the audience for giving criticism of The Last of Us Part 2, saying necessarily the audience is wrong, and if they were mad about that, wait till we go into Intergalactic that covers a lot of religious things. So he's, at this point, just making games to, I guess, challenge ideologies and challenge why. Just make a fucking good game with a good story. It can have religion in it. That's fine. But, why would your focus be the message first and the game second? You're making a video game. What the fuck are you doing? And at some point, you would think Naughty Dog would look at the dropping sales of Naughty Dog. The Last of Us Part 2, the game sales were not as good as The Last of Us Part 1. That's not a secret. And maybe it was because the game leaked, or whatever it is, but the game leaking and people not going out to buy the game is because they didn't like the story that you came up with. No matter what, if the game didn't leak, the first round of people were going to buy the game, the reviews are going to come out, they were going to hate it, and then it would have had less sales anyway. There was a time where studios took the criticisms and the thought process and the ideas of the average gamer and the fan base seriously and what the fans wanted to see. And now Neil Druckmann, who has somehow been put in charge of everything at Naughty Dog, is okay with critiquing and shitting on the criticisms and wants of the audience that originally put Naughty Dog in the space that it is today. And they are okay with standing on the backbone of what the great creators did at Naughty Dog previously, when the majority of the staff that works there today, that are overworked and underpaid as is, never worked on those games to begin with and is being used as a tool from Neil Druckmann. And I don't mean to sit here and shit on Neil Druckmann, but how could you go into an interview, and I get it, Garland was the one who came in there and said, who gives a shit? Wrong of him to do that as well. And at some point you have to also tune out, like, the haters and the people who hate the game for no logical reason, or for, you know, the reasons of being a scumbag, like because they are sexist or homophobic or whatever it is. But you can't look at why the game sucked and why people hated the game and say people hated the game all because of those reasons. That's not true. The majority of the people did not hate the game is because of all those reasons. And what's gonna happen in Naughty Dog is maybe it's for the best that they put out Intergalactic, and maybe it sucks and the sales don't do well and they have to bring people in, different people in, because Neil Druckmann is a creative genius. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that he isn't, and I don't think anybody else should. He did work on those teams that did create Uncharted, that did create The Last of Us. But what I'm saying is, a lot of great creatives need a fucking filter, and that's okay to have a filter. So yeah, Naughty Dog, how the mighty have fallen. I'm going to give Intergalactic a chance because, you know, I for a lot of the trailer, I thought, you know, the concept and the ideas and the theme of it, I thought was cool and different, and, you know, I'm going to give Naughty Dog another chance. But the last 15 years have been Last of Us land. They've released The Last of Us Part 1 3 separate times, and The Last of Us Part 2 like 3 or 4 times, and I'm tired of it. And I just want to get back to a world where we can have people who make great games instead of worrying about the message or their own ideas, and, you know, whatever that is, and whatever Neil Druckmann is doing, instead of just making a good game, you know. Anyways, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace, love, adios, and bye-bye.